Harry Enton on CNN says that Trump is losing young men, and I know why. Before we go further, my name is Casey. I'm a husband, father, a therapist of more than a decade, and a concerned conservative man who wants a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom built in this country. If you can get behind that, please like on the way in, and that will encompass young men and their hopes and dreams. Please like, share, subscribe. Let's get into it. Recent polling on CNN that was just done by, I believe, Marquette has young men at a much less supportive stance toward MAGA, toward the president, and toward really just Republicans in general. And I, as a Republican, somebody who has helped in Republican candidacies here in my home state of Ohio, have some answers why, because unlike some of the politicians and even pollsters, I live in the real world. And in the real world, everything is extremely expensive, and this golden age that we were promised, often maligned by people like Nick Fuentes, has not come. And part of that, as young men see it, would be because of the foreign adventures that we have taken our military on, as well as the continuation of bringing in H-1B visa holders and others to run companies and take positions and take market share out of the housing market that ordinarily would belong to young men. Let's look at a little bit of the reporting about what Harry Enton says about the likelihood or the ability of young men to buy a house in the current market.
Those who powered Donald Trump to victory back in 2024, well, they're feeling a lot of regret over their vote choice. So what are we talking about here? Well, let's talk about what is right at the bottom. If you were building out the house in terms of the American dream, it is literally the ability to buy a home. And young people, well, there's not a lot of hope for them when it comes to buying a home, and these numbers have changed tremendously. Look at this. Okay, age 18 to 34, that is adults under the age of 35, will buy a home in the next 5 years. You go back to 2016, 2018, Gallup surveys, look at that. The majority, 53%, said they would buy a home in the next 5 years, those who didn't already own one. That number has fallen through the floor. Look at this. Now in 2025, 2026, just 29%.
All of the polls that were done in this subset are young men under the age of 35, so young men from ages 18 to 34, and that is especially important as we look throughout the rest of this, because it is really those young men who won the presidency for President Trump, who won his candidacy, who started to take the online podcast bros and many of the other riz that was available online, really got on the side of President Trump. But he did make some promises during his candidacy that had to do with the cost of living, the ability to buy a home, and the availability of good jobs. And as a matter of fact, that particular part has been striking. The amount of men who thought that there were good jobs available in 2022, or who were optimistic about their employment prospects, was 75%. That, among men ages 35 and under right now, is at a strikingly low 43.
Buying a home, it's a good job. You go, leave the home, you have a good job. But young people at this point don't believe it's a good time to actually find a job. Take a look here, age 15 to 34. Say it's a good time to find a job. Now that percentage is just 43%.
These economic conditions did not come out of a vacuum, and even though what we were really expecting from a Republican presidency was a slowdown of the inflation that was occurring under Biden, because inflation is inherently always going to go up. The value of the dollar as a currency that's being used for oil prices throughout the world will always continue to climb, but it was really just the rate of climb that was so stark during COVID and beyond, and that was what we were hoping would slow. Part of the reason why this does feel like a stab in the back is because the economic conditions when President Trump first took office here in 2024 really were ripe for a revival. The gas prices started to go down, the new oil leases and to begin to drill was benefiting the country. Gas prices below $3, and all that seemed hunky-dory enough. Certainly we still had a problem with how many of our jobs were being given overseas, and here in the Midwest we have a deindustrialization crisis. However, some of these email jobs and things that were going to people that are visa holders, could have been held over for Americans. But then came the Iran war. And while President Trump was attempting to rub shoulders and to give massages to people who don't live in our country and certainly don't hold America first principles, the people here at home just hadn't had enough piece of the pie yet to feel that President Trump had fulfilled his campaign promises.
Came into office, this is 2024 and early 2025, before Trump was inaugurated for a second term, 66% of them said it was, in fact, the economic conditions were poor. They were hoping that Trump would solve it. But they view the economic conditions even worse today than just before when Trump got into office.
As oil prices began to climb, we started begging the Iranian leaders to be able to open the Straits of Hormuz. And so what ended up at first looking like it was going to be a military domination because of President Trump's inability to put soldiers on the ground ended up us actually begging a foreign power, one that we were saying we were going to absolutely take behind the woodshed. We were begging them just to let us put shipments of oil through a strait somewhere halfway across the world that we should not have to care about. Those conditions were present before this war started. And so really, more than anything, besides the fact that the young men aged under 35 would be the ones who would have to go fight and defend our country if something extremely bad happened in this conflict. After watching Gen Zers, people like Radim Zoomer, people like Jay Burden over the last several weeks, and after having a great many of my clients being Gen Zers, I recognize so many of the prevalence of the problems that they're feeling unrepresented by their administrations, even when one says the right things up front. They go ahead and they do the wrong. And yes, it has at least something to do with the country in the Middle East that no one stops talking about. There is a great many Gen Zers who just simply want to divorce ourselves from the leaders of those countries and not make it seem as if our country is more concerned with their well-being before our own. It seems as if President Trump has lost these young men. However, there is a dark horse. There is a candidate who quite possibly has a little bit more of the best interests of young men in mind, and while a great many people are maligning him for this very fact, JD Vance wants much less to do with that country in the Middle East. He wants much less to do with giving away our industrial jobs and our other very masculine jobs away to foreign powers and to foreign countries, and he is much more interested in representing what seems like the America First movement. Now, I know that people like Fuentes will make fun of JD Vance because of who he married, along with other reasons they completely dislike him. However, I do think he is a better, and this is part of the reason why Trump picked him and maintains such a good, uplifting message toward him in terms of his presidential prospects in 2028, because he believes that JD Vance can still maintain a certain part of the electorate who really does not want to have foreign venturism anymore. And in that way, there might be a narrow opportunity for those in these younger generations to still be represented by the people in Washington, D.C. And if you would like to continue to help me work on the problems approaching young men in our culture, I am attempting to take up the mantle that was often left by people like Jordan B. Peterson because of his health, and many others. When we feel unrepresented even by the podcaster class, it was time for me to step in and to try to offer my support. If you can get behind that, I would love to earn your favor. Thank you for watching.